Wow. Okay, so we're going to be in Ephesians 4 today and Ephesians 4 and 5. Ephesians 4:1, it starts out, it says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. And so he is coming to this point here now, Paul, he says, therefore, and as you've heard probably many times from pastors say, therefore is there for a reason. It's because he's pulling in all of what he just said and he's saying, like, now I can go on to this, or now let's step into this part because of what I just said, which is that Christ and his love and understanding who he is and how much he loves you and what he's done for you, that he has made us and raised us up to be seated at the right hand with him because of his great love. And he goes on to explain and talk about his love as saying, listen, I want you, all of you, with all the saints to understand, right, what is the width, the length, the height, the depth of his love. And we talked about all those things last week, and he's like, listen, understand that you can be, need to be seated. It's like, because of his love, take a seat. Because of his love, you can rest in the assurance of who he is. Because he's raised you up to that place with him to be seated. So take that rest. And so everything that we do, he's like, therefore, so now let's walk in, or let's come into this place where we can walk, but it's always from a place of being seated. Always like, well, how can I walk and sit at the same time? Physically, I can't really, unless I'm scooting the chair with my legs, and I don't know, it's really weird. But in our lives and how we live, our spirit, there is a place where we can walk, and even as he goes in further, that we'll talk about next week, we can stand against, do all these things while being seated, meaning while being rested, while we are not striving in ourselves, wanting just what we want, but being rested in who Christ is and coming from that place. So he says, because of the love of Christ and all that he's done, take a seat. Now, after you take a seat, now let's talk about how we can walk. And we can't walk until we sit. See, this is where, it comes to this place of, okay, I know this stuff, or talking about God's love, what Christ did for us. I know these things. But it just makes me think of my mom. She's not here to argue the story that I'm going to tell, but it's not about her. It's about me anyway. So, but she tells me, or others, or whoever, I don't know, that I started walking so early. Like I don't know. I think it gets younger and younger every time isn't that what happens with stories? It's like, at 6 weeks. No, I don't know. She says 9 months or something. She's like, you just got up and walked. You didn't even crawl. You didn't even crawl. You just kind of were on your belly and you just stood up. And I don't know. That's kind of how I remember the story, but it's like this, wow, this thing, right? When I grew up, and you learn about kids, that there's actually so many fundamental things that happen in the crawling stage that it is actually needed. And now I'm like, well, shoot, it's almost like my mom was bragging, or I was bragging. I was like, look, I didn't even have to crawl. One day I was just laying on my belly and then I just got up and started walking. It's like, who needs that? It's funny. It's funny. But that's what we're talking about here. You see, we can't skip that stage. And that's what he's saying is like being seated. What Christ has done for us, raising us up with him in this heavenly place, is to be seated and to find that place. To be seated, have that rest. And all of this coming out of that. Anything else is coming out of that. And you can't skip that stage and go straight to walk in. Otherwise, there's developmental disabilities. I don't know which ones I have, but I probably have them because I didn't crawl. You get my point, though, right? So you're like, let's see. We'll see if we can figure out which ones he has. All right. We're saying, therefore, now, walk worthy because of what we talked about before and only in what we talked about before, not skipping that step. Now walk worthy of the calling with which you have been called. In verse 2, it says, with all lowliness. So he goes on to kind of explaining, is like, really, like, let me tell you what you've been called to or how you are supposed to live this out. Now, it's not your specific calling that God has given you, but it's our calling as Christians how to walk and how to live. In verse 2, he says, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So he goes through a couple of things, lowliness, and you're like, wow. I don't know. I mean, lowliness sometimes is kind of like, you could think of it as this negative kind of connotation to it. But no matter what we think about it, what it means is just not really seeing ourselves so highly that we see ourselves higher than any others. This, one of the definitions, it says a deep sense of one's moral littleness. It's just understanding and knowing our littleness. Because we all have that moral littleness, meaning that it's not anything that we've done that gets us somewhere, or because, I'm all that, but it's because of what he's done. And so how could I then think of myself so highly that I can look down on somebody else? Because I'm higher. No. We're there. It's because of him and all he's done. Gentleness, meekness, mildness. That statement, I think it's my youngest brother. That's what it was. It has a shirt. And if anybody knows my youngest brother, he's, just a little bit bigger than I am. He's a big guy. He's got this shirt on the back that says, don't confuse, or something like, don't confuse meekness for weakness. And it's funny, because it really does. It's like, funny that he wears it, because it really is him. Like, he is the nicest guy. It's a big teddy bear. A lot of times, guys, they're big old guys. You don't realize they're big old teddy bears. You can just squeeze them, They just want a hug. Okay. But don't mistake meekness for weakness. Meekness doesn't mean weakness. It just means gentleness, kindness. No matter how strong you are, no matter how big you are, being able to be kind. This long-suffering, patience, endurance, perseverance. And then he goes to say, bearing with one another. And that word, bearing with one another, it means to hold up or to sustain. I love that because, at first you read that and you think, okay, I'm going to, you say, bear with me. It's like, okay, I'll bear with you, I'll suffer through this. I'll wait here. I'm here with you, but, I don't really want to be. Something like that. But that's not what that means. He says, bearing with one another, meaning, he's saying, sustaining, helping, holding each other up, lifting each other up, being there for one another, to endure. So, because you are helping each other to get through this. So bearing with one another. How do you do that? Look, we already talked about it last week, a whole bunch. Bearing with one another in love. Because there is love there, because of what Christ did for us. Endeavoring to keep the unity. This isn't unity of one unified, universal church. We're going to get all together. This is unity in diversity. Unity in that we aren't all exactly the same. But knowing that there are so many facets of each of us individually that are able to represent who God is. And really it's pride to think that that's not the case, because that means you think that you actually are the perfect example of who God is and have all of that in somebody else that's a little bit different. Okay, I'm not going to go there. But endeavoring to keep the unity, that spirit of unity. How do you do that? It says to keep the unity of the Spirit. It's not your unity. You didn't create it. It's not something that you did that caused this unity. It's the unity of the Spirit. It's the Spirit that creates, that establishes, that brings that unity. And he's saying, just endeavor, strive with all of who you are to be able to keep that unity that the Spirit has created. Walk in that. And going to Ephesians 5, verse 1. It says, therefore, now that he's talked to us about a few more of these things, like bringing us into this understanding of now that we can walk because we are seated. He says, therefore, be imitators of God as dear children, and walk in love, as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma. He says, therefore, be imitators. Who are we imitating? I was thinking about this, and I was like, I never watched it, but there's a movie called Imitation Game. And I was just thinking, man, it's so interesting, this word, imitator. It really just means to be a follower. To follow, to do like I do. Not I, but he does. To act. To be like him. To be an imitator. I was thinking, who are those? One of those questions. Who are we imitating? Friends? Parents? Our parents, maybe. Sometimes that's good, but also that's not complete. The person on social media? Who are we imitating? Is it God? That's what he's saying here. He's like, look, be imitators as dear children of God. Saying that's what I'm talking about when in this whole walk. He's shown us this love. He's shown us this long suffering. He's shown us this perseverance, this bearing with us. He bore with us, holding us up and walking with us, alongside of us in this time that it took too long, way longer than it should have to get where we're at, but he bore with us. In verse 2, and walk in love. Being an imitator. Follower. I don't know if you've seen this movie, Young Frankenstein. And a couple of people have, because I can tell. And it was a long, long time ago. But I always thought it was so funny. It's like this funny kind of spin-off spoof of Frankenstein. And there's Igor, not Igor, but Igor. And he picks up this descendant of Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, from the train, and he gets his bags and he says, walk this way. Like this. And he's like, okay. He's like, no, walk this way. like this. And he's like, oh. Hey, so he starts walking like that. He's like, no, walk exactly how I do, And it's funny. But I think about that. I think about this scripture. It's like, be imitators. Imitate him. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm doing that. And God's like, no, walk, not with a limp, but no, walk this way. No, exactly how I'm doing it. Walk exactly how I am. Love exactly how I've loved you. Bear with one another is exactly how I've bore with you. Walk in that long suffering, in that meekness, in that kindness, just as I have with you. No, do it this way. Walk this way. I got a lot of funny stories for you today, I guess. You guys, if y'all go out of here walking like that, it'd be really funny. But here Paul, he's saying, listen, understand that he is what he's done for you. And so let's walk exactly like him, being imitators. In 1 Peter 1:15 and 16, it says a similar thought. It says, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in your conduct, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. Right? Be holy, for I am holy. As he is called, who has called you as holy, be holy. Not because it's yourself, not because it's something that you've done or just because you want to be, but being an imitator, being that representation of who he is, following in his footsteps because he's holy. Walk in that holiness. See, imitation is a form of praise. Right? What's that statement? Imitation is the highest form of flattery. Who are we flattering? Who do we want to flatter? That's the question. Who are we giving the glory? And here's what he's saying. He's like, listen, it's his. It's God's. The glory is all his. Really, for everything. It's like, really, right now, I'm just talking about you, me, our lives, and what he's done for us and how it should change us so that we can walk with love as he has or be rested and seated because of his love, and then be able to walk in that and with that love and imitating him. So he says again, Ephesians 5:1, therefore be imitators of God as dear children and walk in love as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet smelling aroma. Walk in love as Christ has also loved you. And he says, Christ, he walked in love and gave himself for us. So his walking in love was giving himself for us. And that love and that giving of who he was for us to bring us to this place of redemption was a sweet smelling aroma. Imagine, everybody likes a good candle, We're pretty particular about candle smells. I don't know if you are too. I think we all usually are. The problem is we all like different smells. Some people like the real flowery stuff. Some people like the real manly, musky stuff. That's me. But the deal is like that aroma when you light that candle. I just imagine we're like a little candle. And as we are, like he's saying, walking in love, being imitators of Christ who loved us and gave himself for us. And he was this sweet smelling aroma in that moment that he gave himself for us. And we being imitators, we can also be that as we walk in love toward others around us. And imagine, I don't want to stink, like anybody. Who does? Nobody does. I don't want to stink. If you're like me, you're like, okay, so we're going to take, and this is what he's saying. It's a sweet smelling aroma when we love. It's like, so if I don't do that, actually, if I'm mean and cranky, and if I'm a jerk to people, and if I'm really just hard-nosed and angry, it's like, what's that? It's like, Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's just the stuff that comes to my head is so, so you got this sweet smelling aroma, this fragrance, like the lighting of a candle when we walk in love, and we're walking like him. But if we're not in that place and we're being in this place that is, that's ornery, that's mean, that's holding a grudge, that's judging, that's spiteful and all this, it's like, you're just a big fart. That's like, just was there. It was in my head. So hopefully it'll stay in your head too. Look, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? Okay. There it is. Look, you're going to remember it. It's going to be funny. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh. Ephesians 5:8. Let me go. Let's move on. He says, "For you were once darkness." There wasn't light there. It was dark. We weren't in the place that we should be. He says, but now you are light in the Lord. There's some, I love that in this, that it because in other places it says, for you once were in darkness and now you're in light. But here it says, you were once darkness. Not just in, but you were darkness, meaning that the light of who Christ was not there. And because of what he's done, because of his love, with which he loved us, it says, but now you are light because he is the light of the world, right? He is that, and it disperses darkness. And now, because of what he's done for you and I, that it has come to us. That light has shone on us. And now you are light. So it says, walk. Walk as children of light. Let's look at it. We don't want to walk as children of darkness anymore. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. Finding out what is acceptable to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. She says, what? Now, let me drive this home. He's like, look, you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. He's changed that. He's brought that light and exposed the darkness and driven the darkness away in you. So now you have that light of who Christ is in you, and the darkness should not be there. Because of what he's done. And so he says, as he continues on, so don't have fellowship. Don't fellowship. And now you get into these places of like, okay, I can't be around in you. You're bad, That's darkness. I have to run away. And the only people that I can be around are super spiritual people. And that is not what this is saying. It's saying don't fellowship. Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. There's something different there where he's saying, hey, look, don't fellowship with the works of darkness. The light of Christ that is now residing in you needs to be seen by those that haven't been exposed to who he is yet. They need to see that. They need to experience that. But while that's happening, don't have fellowship with the works of darkness. Don't be there in that place and start doing what they do. Don't start thinking that it's okay, that it's, oh, well, Yeah. Ooh. See, I believe that that's kind of one of the problems nowadays. So we're all like, yeah, we're walking as children of the light. The problem is we've started fellowshipping with the unfruitful works of darkness. Allowing those things that are not of God, that are not truth, that are not holy, that are not righteous, and somehow allowing ourselves to, because in times we have been fellowshipping with those unfruitful works, allowing ourselves now to believe. When I say ourselves, I just mean church, Christians in general. There's just more of this happening where it's like, okay, now, no, this is okay. This is good. This is acceptable. It's just different now than it was, somehow. I don't know. But let me tell you that truth doesn't change. Truth doesn't get out of date. Times can change, but God doesn't, and truth doesn't. Well, let me caveat this where it says, have no fellowship with unfaithful works of darkness, but rather expose them. The Bible tells us to speak the truth in love. Right? We've been talking a lot about love. And truth is truth. But truth and love go together. They cannot be separated. They're two sides of a coin. And truth separated from love is religiosity. It's being hard-nosed. It is rules and regulations, and that is why I am holy or righteous. Love without truth is open to anything and everything, because there's no truth. It's what is your truth? Love without truth means that you have to just love everything, and it means that everything is right. But that's not what our Bible tells us. And when it says, but rather expose them, we have to understand, we have to know that any time that we are asked, that God asks us to speak the truth, wherever it is, to your spouse, to your brother or sister, to your classmate, to your coworker, to that person that's out wherever in the grocery store, no matter where it is, he might ask us to speak the truth, but he for sure will ask us to speak the truth in love, which means coming in a place of humility, long-suffering. In a place that is not self-righteous, but loving and truthful. There's a big difference. I don't think I'm going to go on in that right now. But truth should be spoken, and it can be spoken in a way that draws people to who he is. Now, just think about it in that way. What is going to draw somebody to him? Is it yelling the truth at somebody without love? Is it loving and not sharing what truth is? Or is it speaking the truth in love that shows who Christ is? What will draw them? And I think that's where it's gotten distorted, and that's what the enemy wants to do. That attack is to distort and to get us to feel like there's only one way that somebody will hear, and it's if I just agree with them. And the problem is if, I've seen over and over and over in my life, and many times in stories, things that I've heard, other testimonies, that when there's love and there's truth, there may be a hard time, but every time there will be some moment of coming back because the person knows that you will be honest and loving. If you sway with every different wind that blows, there's no respect there. There's no weight there. So why would the person come back? They'll be like, I don't know. It depends on what day it is, what they'll tell me. Okay. In verse 13. Ephesians 5:13, it says, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore, he says, awake, you who sleep. Arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. Listen, there's also in this scripture, he says, listen, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by Christ, by who he is, not by who you are, not because of your argument. Sometimes that even keeps us from speaking truth because we're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what I'm going to do. How am I even going to walk this thing out in this world? Because you know what the amazing thing is it's not on me. It's not on you that actually brings any of this. It's him. It's who he is. And when we get that, when we understand that, right? Like, again, going back to chapters 1 through 3, that this whole understanding of his love, really is bringing us to the place of being seated with him, meaning like I'm not worrying that I have to do something on my own or that I have to figure it out or that I have to be so strong or I have to be so smart. And that's why he says, he's like, listen, coming to that place, knowing that we're seated with him. That there is, in that place, you are there, and then we can walk. Then you're able to walk, and you're not on your own strength, right? That's what I was just saying. So then you come to the moment, and God's like, hey, I want you to pray for this person. I want you to speak some truth. I want you to speak. Oh, I don't know. He's like, hey, don't worry. You're here, seated right here with me. Now, when you walk, you can walk right here with me. Not trusting in your own strength, but in mine. Allow me to lead you, guide you. Because it's his light. His light is the one, the light of who he is that exposes the darkness. Awake, you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. I love that statement. And I believe, again, a number of things that I believe God's been asking me to speak is just it's for us, it's for me, it's for us as a church, it's for, I believe, the people of God all over the place. That he's speaking this to us and saying this, awake, sleeper. Arise, get up, stop sleeping, stop wandering around in the darkness, but wake up and be in the light and allow him to lead you, to guide you, to manifest who he is through your life. Arise from the dead. Will you stand up with me?